Hey, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. Well, I'm sure you're wondering why we would put in the word spooky. That is, if my wife did put the word in spooky into the title, which I told her to. But anyway, spooky messages. You know, I'm just looking at the idea that the prediction for the coronavirus was made in the form of a fiction book, which was The Eyes of Darkness by Dean Koontz, and it was later re-released, and they changed the name. At first it wasn't called coronavirus, right? But the description of the virus back then in the 1980s, and they predicted that the author in the form of a fiction story predicted that this could happen in, coincidentally, 2020. And I already went into this about the two very big coincidental stories that were written by authors, which later proved to be fact. And although the author of Eyes of Darkness didn't get it completely right, apparently CNN said it's ridiculous to think. They didn't agree that it could be that the author had predicted it. It just wasn't. It was just too outlandish. And so I wanted to look at the idea that in the same way
results from a search.
Perhaps this is my phone telling me I got something through from a search. But I wanted to look at the idea of we often get these in what we call intuitive messages, and in that particular case, perhaps that's what Dean Koontz got. And there was another one that I cited in another video that I made, where I talked about the Titanic and how an author, some 15 years before the Titanic was even designed, wrote about a ship that was almost same dimensions, a 4-stack boiler, 800 feet long, which actually went down in his book, which was fictional. He said in his book that it was launched as an unsinkable ship. It struck an iceberg and it went down in the North Atlantic in April. And all of these things were exactly as it happened in real life with the Titanic. And coincidentally, he called his fictional ship that was ahead of its time, he called it the Titan. So now, I wonder what the mechanism is for receiving that kind of information, which clearly, to my mind, those authors must have had some inkling that something like this could happen, whether it was a flight of imagination, which would have to be incredibly coincidental for it to happen like that. But I wanted to look at, if you think about how we get a lot of our information, we don't get it in the way that we think. Now, I know that as a musician, I have to know about sound, and as an artist, and both of those careers I've enjoyed to be as an artist and as an artiste. So, in the case of sound, everybody thinks that we go along and all of these sounds they're actually there. I mean, somehow this sound is a sound before it reaches our ears. No, it's not a sound until it reaches your ears, because the person who is deaf has defective ears and those sounds don't exist for him. And a person also who is colorblind doesn't perceive color. And where does that happen? Now, someone who is of a particular kind of colourblind doesn't see the colour red. He sees it as a kind of a dim, I don't know, kind of a brown, if you like, a warm brown. Now, that doesn't mean that the London bus that goes past him is not red. The London bus that passes him is the same red that it always is when it starts its day in the morning and ends up at the depot in the evening. It is what it is, and it conveys certain information which we as receivers, be it from the eyes or be it from the ears or smell, all of these senses are interpreted and received and become what we think they are when we receive them. So when we hear something, it's not because that exists in the form that we hear it. It exists in the form we hear it only when it's received in a mechanism, the ear, which is working properly. Same with the eye, which is working properly. The eye, for instance, if you think about how we receive our visual information goes onto the back of the eyes, on the membrane at the back of the eyes, and it goes on upside down, and then it's interpreted from there. It's turned around, and the brain interprets what it sees in the way that it should be. Now, what they've done is when they've done research into how the eye works, they've made special glasses which, when the person puts the glasses on, it turns everything upside down. So now the eye is looking at something that's upside down, and what does it do? It turns everything back again. Okay, now here's the clincher. If they get the guy to get the subject to wear the glasses for long enough, and when he takes off the glasses, he's actually looking at everything upside down before it's turned again. So the eye will keep on compensating for whatever it sees. It doesn't mean that things physically are changing. If you sit in the back of a bus and look at the back, you'll see everything receding. It will be as if everything is receding from you as the bus takes you away. Now, if you sit there for a couple of hours, say, and watch everything going away, when you get out of the bus and see things normally, you will see that the eye is now compensating, and things have the apparency of coming towards you because things are being changed inside for the brain to interpret, for the mind to interpret. So my point is, if all of these ways of communicating are not perceived as they really are, most people don't realize that there is no such thing as sound until it is interpreted in terms of vibrations through the ear and into the brain or the mind. So these other messages that come through are nonetheless real to my way of thinking. Now, messages that are in the air, information that's in all around us right now, which we don't have the equipment to actually receive, like a radio, like we turn on a radio, and the radio can receive information that is there, which if we had that equipment, we would be able to hear that direct without the radio. When we look at the television, the signal is coming along in lines, and it all gets put together on the screen and we see it. We don't know that that's there even though it is. So my idea is that we shouldn't disbelieve, we shouldn't refuse to believe that information is coming in all the time, which we are choosing for one reason and another not to receive. Now, I've talked about this before, about how with someone, if you want someone to start looking for a particular thing, you set them up, you set yourself up to see that. So if you're looking, say, the simplest example is to say, if you're looking for a particular car and you decide that you're going to, you're interested in buying a particular car that is perhaps not commonly seen, maybe a Volvo. And I don't see any Volvos in the Philippines, so pick the Volvo. Now, you don't see those normally, but you decide that you're going to be interested. Now, the brain, or the mind through the brain is sifting probably billions of pieces of information at any given time. And if you were to receive all of that information, you would just be in overload. You'd be completely overwhelmed. So we have a self-filtering system that is employed every waking hour, every waking minute, and that system filters out all of the stuff that you're not actually really very interested in. Someone who is totally into art and not in any way interested in, say, mathematics will not receive information about math. I mean, I'm oversimplifying here, but you will not receive information. You will receive the information which is pertinent, which is relevant to what you're interested in. So if you're looking for a Volvo, suddenly you start seeing every Volvo. Well, it's not that all the Volvo owners in the Philippines suddenly said, oh gosh, he's interested in a Volvo, we better get out and drive around in front of him. That's not what happens. They were always there, but you were not filtering the information according to what you wanted. So if you take that further and say, how can I be more receptive to the other information that is out there, which I am clearly filtering out? And this is something that people have battled with for the longest time. And we perceive a universe out there, a physical universe, which is to our liking and to our agreement. That's why you hear it said so much by the New Age, The Secret, all the people who are trying to tell you that you are responsible for what you perceive. You know, someone who perceives a world that is so pitiful, so terrible, that they don't want to live in it, may use that judgment in order to take their own life. And that is happening a lot more than we think as well. But those people who take joy in many, many things around them, that they see the place that they live in, those people are responsible for creating their reality, and their reality is such that they are seeing what they want to see, what they want to be there. So for the same person who is standing next to the person, our hypothetical person who is going to take his life because life isn't worth living if this is all that there is, then he's not, the world is no different. The perception of the world is what is there, what you perceive to be there. And in gaining a different way of looking at things, of refusing to be in a state of disbelief, you can open yourself up to other things. If in the case of our hypothetical Volvo, if you actually have never particularly liked Volvos and you're in conversation with someone whose opinion you respect, and he says some of the winning information that can be given about the Volvo car. I knew someone who worked in the emergency room in the UK, where there are lots of Volvos, and she worked in the emergency room and saw accidents coming in on every shift, and she said, I can tell when the person comes in whether they were driving in a Volvo, because the injuries would be so much more minimal, because Volvo was among the first to put a frame which would protect the passengers and have a collapsible zone out the front where things would not be allowed to intrude on that box. And so it was true that it was a safer car to be with and to be in. So these things can be confirmed when you open yourself up. So if you'd never thought of getting a Volvo before, and then suddenly you think, wow, I'd be safer in a Volvo, and then you start looking for them, and you will see them, because your filtering system will automatically, now that it's opened up to the idea of a Volvo, which you had previously shut down. No, I'm not interested in that, so you don't hardly see them. And now you would be seeing things because you had changed your perspective and were open to it. Now if we can open ourselves up to changes in perception, then we will see changes being perceived by us. It's the same world. Everything is still the same. The colours are the same. Red is still bright red. A sound is a sound. It's all still the same. But now we have opened our perception, and remember that common phrase, if someone was refusing to look at something in a different way, you say, oh, for goodness sake, try thinking out of the box. In other words, you are contained in a certain within certain parameters of awareness, and in order to start seeing things differently, you have to get yourself out of that box, to expand and to go further than the boundaries that you have previously been imprisoned by. Well, I see that I've talked too long on this subject again. So that's what I think. In opening yourself up, we can start seeing things in a much different way, and to our benefit. Don't forget to like, and if you can comment or subscribe, well, definitely you should subscribe. Bye for now.